Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz from Israel 365 News. I'm going to do an unusual uh, interview today because usually I say this is a dear friend, and it really is a dear friend, except this time it's an especially dear friend, John Enarson. And we're going to be talking about something that I've done and something that I'm going to do through the merit of my dear friend, John Enarson, which is John is one of the heads of Cry for Zion. I'll let him tell you about that. But the Cry for Zion, I think actually might have been the first time I met you was in 2018. They had a Temple Mount Jerusalem convention. And I am not exaggerating when I say I am still feeling the effects of that convention. It was very small, very focused, and it rocked the world. Um, it was at that particular convention was intended to dispel the myth of where the actual temple stood. There is a myth that it stood where we now see the city of David, but that is absolutely contradicts all of the archaeological evidence and all of the traditions and all of the historical records. But nonetheless, that persists. And they decided to dispel that. And there were a lot of good reasons to do that, which we'll discuss at another time. But we had that conference, and it was so effective that they wanted to do another one. But the dark side conspired against them and made Corona delay the next conference. So now that Corona has dissipated, there's going to be a Temple Mount conference coming up. And that will hopefully again shake the world and get us moving in the right direction. It'll be held on April 9th, which is Passover. It'll be held in the Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. But through all these amazing miracles that will appear to us in the form of internet, it will be available for people all over the world to join in this amazing thing. It really is amazing. And there are a lot of friends who are going to be there for me, a lot of soon-to-be friends. But this is definitely something that I think people should be talking about and people should be aware of. So, John, it's great to see you. Tell me about why you wanted to do this Temple Mount conference.
Well, the first one was really an amazing experience and groundbreaking, like you said. It was a meeting of really Bible believing Jews, Orthodox Jews, and Bible believing Christians, and everything in between, to meet and discuss something that we had a common interest in, which is the situation of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and everything about it. And I don't think that's ever really been done before. And it was such an amazing experience. And it wasn't, I mean, usually when you have these kind of meetings of Jews and Christians, a lot of times it's been with really liberal type of streams, and maybe Reform Judaism, maybe really liberal interfaith type dialogue people, not really your normal evangelical pastors or Orthodox Jewish people or rabbis showing up and discussing what is really on people's heart and being free to do that in Jerusalem when it comes to the Temple Mount, the holiest place in the world. So, like you said, we have an organization, Cry for Zion, which I'm a Christian theology student living in Israel, and Cry for Zion is focused on bringing Christian support for Jewish rights and freedoms and sovereignty on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And as part of that, we do a lot of education about the Temple Mount, and that's where this convention was born out of. Unfortunately, Corona delayed the next one until now, but now this Passover, we're going to have it in person and live stream. And I think one of the things that we wanted to do was to focus on all nations, that famous quote that both the prophet Isaiah and Jesus quotes Isaiah, where it is a house of prayer for all nations. That's the destiny of ultimately the Temple Mount. And so where the first convention was focused on, we had to dispel myths and get into debates and talk about, a lot of controversy. There's so much controversy with the Temple Mount already. And I think what's really missing really missing from the picture is people who are passionate about the Temple Mount, who are excited about what God is doing. That's the focus of this convention and what the scriptures really have to say about this place. It's a fantastic, really vision that we want to explore together as both Jews and Christians.
Yeah, it's funny, sometimes I have a dear friend who refers to the Bible as the common Bible, meaning we have it in common. Jews and Christians are two people divided by a common Bible, a Bible a Bible that we share. Um, when I as a Jew living in Israel, I'm like, look around. We're inside the prophecy, and we're at a generation where not too many people remember what it was like to have a world without Israel. But now that we have Israel, this is clearly a manifestation of so many prophecies in the Bible. But Israel was a process. We started out, we didn't have Israel, then we had Israel, then we had Jerusalem, which is another amazing step. But that's not the end. And as a Jew, I'm looking forward to the day when I can walk into doors that lead into the temple and I will be standing inside the prophecy. Do Christians have that view of the third temple?
I think that Christianity historically, if we look at the negative side of the relationship to the Jewish people, Christian theology really took shape. We're talking after the apostles, after the New Testament era. It really took shape after the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and exiled the Jewish people. And what happened was it really removed Jerusalem, and especially the temple and the Jewish people, from the center of Christian theology. So I heard someone say once that Christian theology, classically in the church history, has been an attempt to take the biblical message and remove its geographical and its ethnic center and just universalize it completely. And so Christians have not been very used to looking at the biblical picture where God says, Zion is my throne. This is my throne on earth. I've put my name and reputation here forever. This is my holy mountain. So it's a new kind of concept, but that's for Christians, but that's familiar from the Bible. And what I love what you said about, we're now kind of used to living in a reality where there is Israel, and take it for granted almost. And there was a time when that was not so. And there were a few minority of Christians who understood that Israel would be restored and the Jewish people would be regathered, and understood the biblical prophetic message about that, all the way from Moses to the prophets. It's everywhere. And then it happened, and it rocked the world, and it rocked the Christian world as well, theologically. And then 50 years later, after 1948, Jerusalem was restored, but not the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, the keys were given away to the Jordanian Muslim Waqf, and severe discrimination was placed on the Jewish people on their rights on the Temple Mount, even though they have the full legal rights to it. And that's been missing now for 50 years. But do we have people? I mean, if God has restored Israel and he has restored Jerusalem, will he restore the Temple Mount? I think he will. And I think that's the biblical message. How that will happen, we don't know. I mean, it must have seemed like, for the early pioneers who came and settled the land and returned to the land during Ottoman rule, if we think before the state of Israel was reborn, a Jewish state must have seemed like such a unrealistic dream in that political situation. That would not have been realistic for them. Yeah, I mean, it would have seemed so unrealistic for Jews in the land of Israel during Ottoman rule, when things seemed politically impossible to have a Jewish state reborn. But ultimately, just times changed and it became a reality. And ultimately, with a biblical foundation, that this is what God wanted to do in history. And what I can see is that God wants to restore the Temple Mount someday in history. But right now, there is a situation in Jerusalem where Jews should be, they have the law and all the rights on their side, that are being discriminated against. You can't pray there. Christians can't pray there with the Jewish people. If you look at the Western Wall, what a fantastic, free, and blessed place it is for people all over the world, and primarily for the Jewish people. Why can't that freedom under the sovereignty of the state of Israel be on the Temple Mount? There isn't, so
That's actually,
on our hearts.
if I may, that point you just made, it also works the other way. People don't understand that what they have can be lost. Israel still has existential threats on all sides, and especially when it comes to issues like the Temple Mount. Thank God, I've been merited to go up to the Temple Mount several times. I've even prayed up there. When they talk about the status quo, it's not what they think. The status quo is actually a reference to laws that were made under the Ottoman Empire, but it's actually gone backwards. Jews used to be able to go into the Dome of the Rock and go into the Aqsa Mosque. We can't do that anymore. They're grabbing more and more. Aqsa Mosque is the building, but now they're using it to refer to the entire mount, and even sometimes Jerusalem in entirety. We are standing at a point where we can literally lose Jerusalem. The two-state solution, when they talk about a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem is a euphemism for the Temple Mount.
For biblical Jerusalem.
For biblical Jerusalem. Everything, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, all that stuff will go to the Palestinians who do not believe in religious freedom, do not believe in religious equality, do not believe in pluralism. But if the two-state solution happens, Jews will be prohibited from going to the Western Wall because that's East Jerusalem. We will lose the Temple Mount, and we will lose any possibility of the Third Temple, which the Third Temple, according to Jewish tradition, is one of the jobs of a Jewish king, is to rebuild the temple. That's one of the signs of Messiah, and that will be out of the picture entirely, with no possibility of ever happening. So the fact that we can have this conference now, we have to have it now. If we don't have it now, we'll be talking about science fiction. Oh, the Third Temple. Oh, that was when Israel actually had any kind of presence on and Jews were permitted to go up to the Temple Mount. It's not a given. Could be next year Jews will not be permitted to go up to the Temple Mount. It's very possible. So we're close.
Yeah, I said during the first convention that I've noticed something, and that is often that the people who care about the Temple Mount are painted out as extremists and nuts and fruits and flakes, and crazy people. But really, it's the opposition to our common vision that are radical, that want to split Jerusalem down the middle. They are the ones who want to build a Berlin Wall and divide Jerusalem into East and West. They're the ones who want to segregate Arabs and Jews away from each other. And they're the ones who want to split and divide and allow radical elements to seize control over Jerusalem. And that's what's so crazy about the picture. At that conference, those people who care about peace, should be all for this.
At that conference, I remember I was standing, I think it was, I wanted to talk to Daron, and next to me was a gentleman who I didn't know, and I said, "Oh, who are you?" And he was asking some very strange questions, and I asked, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, I'm the reporter for National Geographic." I'm like, "Really?" He said, "Yes, I'm the archaeology reporter." Wow, the archaeology reporter for National Geographic, very impressive. And I'm here because I don't think that the temples did stand on the Temple Mount. And I'm like, "Really?" He said, "There's no archaeological proof. This is the archaeology reporter." I'm like, "What do you mean there's no archaeology proof? Have you been up there?" He's like, "Yeah, but that's not archaeology." archaeology is, you have to do the digs in a specific way. And he literally said there's no proof that there ever were any Jewish temples. It's written in the Bible, but that's not a source. You can't believe the
Yeah,
Bible.
I think those people just really embarrass themselves in the end. They seem to be so intellectual and in their skepticism and so scholarly, but really you're just embarrassing yourself. I mean, you wouldn't apply the same criteria to any other part of history or archaeology, but it's just because it has matters of faith or the Bible involved with it, you're going to be a super minimalist.
But no
But
one's calling him an extremist.
right. and though a lot of media published from that convention, because it was such an exciting convention and we're looking forward to the next one, National Geographic were the only ones who never ended up publishing anything.
Because there was you made your case, but there was no archaeological proof that there ever were any Jewish temples.
I mean, you ask someone like Lane Rittmeyer, who has been archaeological architect for all the great digs in Jerusalem, and he's painstakingly gone around. So, okay, there's no archaeological dig in the classic sense on the Mount, but we have the people who did surveys during the Palestine Exploration Fund 100 years ago, plus, and then we have the actual Temple Mount sifting project. But leaving that aside, if you just had the archaeology around the entire mount, all four walls, the western wall, the eastern wall, the southern, and the northern, and you go through all of that archaeology, which is documented by somebody like Lane Rittmeyer, and you see how it matches up one for one with the Mishnah, with Josephus, with all the whole historical records and the Bible, and everything places the temple inside of that compound. What are you telling me? It wasn't there?
Right.
Like,
Right. I mean, it's funny. I think it's so poignant that you're bringing together Jews and Christians, because to deny the temple, okay, I have an interest as a Jew. It was the Jewish temple. But to say, oh, the temples never existed, so where did Jesus walk?
Yeah. This was the former ambassador to the United States during the Obama administration, I believe, from Israel. Is his name Michael Oren?
Michael. I just spoke to him today.
Yeah, he said, this is something that Jews and Christians find common ground on. To deny temple denial syndrome attacks Christians as much as Jews. This is where Jesus was continually teaching. This was the center of his ministry. This is where all the apostles, they made it their home center in Jerusalem throughout the book of Acts and the New Testament. This is where they met daily. This was a home church for them, was the temple. So, if you're that denial syndrome covers Christians and Jews equally. Besides that, we share the entire Hebrew Bible and all the biblical prophets were there,
Yeah, people should make no mistake that the ultimate goal of any plan to wrest Jerusalem away from the Jews, the ultimate goal is to erase every page of the Bible, including the New Testament, because you can't you can't say the Jews have no place on the Temple Mount. Well, even Christianity says that at least one Jew had a place on the Temple Mount, and they're trying to deny that as well. And that's I was told that when Arafat was at Camp David, was it with Ehud Barak and Bill Clinton? They were. Did I get those facts right?
Yep, you did.
And they were negotiating, and when Barak, against the advice of all his counselors, was ready to give everything, including Jerusalem, to except for Jerusalem, to Arafat, and they were talking about why Jerusalem was important, and Arafat said, well, there never were any Jewish temples on the Temple Mount. Bill Clinton just stood there in shock and did not know how to go forward from there. It was, but that is what they're saying.
And Arafat stormed out from Camp David, and from that day told all the media that this is not the Temple Mount, this is the Haram al-Sharif.
Right.
And the media slavishly followed his direction from that Camp David summit. And from then on, all the major media around the world would say, we're supposedly Jewish temples where Jews claim their temple was, or Haram al-Sharif, also called by Jews the Temple Mount, where supposedly the temple stood. Like every article by Associated Press or anything would basically follow that kind of verbiage. It was just really crazy. But I'm so excited now seeing the developments that have happened, how things are moving in Israel. I mean, we've been talking about this in the Christian world, and now we see there's a new Temple Mount awareness and a new excitement. The red heifers have arrived. Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson have been up ascending on the Temple Mount. I mean, there's just so much happening.
You actually wrote something on the website, on the site for the conference. You said that in 2013, 180,000 Christian visitors ascended to the Temple Mount. And by 2018, right, this was up to 670,000.
Yeah.
So that's how many? It's more than three. It's 3.5 times. My math is horrible, but more than three. And there's been, of course, we all know, a corresponding increase or even a greater increase amongst the Jews that go up. It's just the interest in the Temple Mount, the focus on the Temple Mount is going through the roof.
Times of Israel wrote after the first convention that we said we are noticing this major uptick of Temple Mount awareness in the Christian world, but they said you guys can't provide any stats. Well, now we have the stats for a 5-year period of exponential interest during those years just before Corona, where every year was breaking records of tourism to Israel in general, the entire history of the state. But the Temple Mount was soaring exponentially in the stats from, like you said, 180,000 tourists to the Temple Mount, non-Jews. The majority of them are obviously going to be evangelical Christians, ascending the Temple Mount in 2013, and then 5 years later, you're up to almost 700,000. I mean, for a 5-year period of increase,
something's happening, and it's interesting. It's not. There's clearly. Whenever there are articles saying that the Waqif and the Palestinians are trying to stop Jews from going up to the Temple Mount, and it's forbidden for Jews to pray on the Temple Mount, that's not accurate. They're trying to prevent all non-Muslims from going up. Non-Muslims, Christians are forbidden from praying on the Temple Mount. A Christian may not wear, I don't know if a Christian can wear a cross on the Temple Mount. Something tells me
they can't wear their Israel t-shirts that they got on their tour.
They can't wear they certainly can't wear their Israel t-shirts, but they may not. They're not allowed to pray. They're not allowed to pray, take up a prayer book or a Psalms. They are prevented. And I found out, I wrote about this the other day, and it's common knowledge. I had never seen it, because they do try to keep distance between the Jewish visitors to the Temple Mount and the Christian visitors. The Waqif has special clothes with big yellow stripes for Christians to wear. If they say, oh, it's for immodestly dressed, but exactly the opposite is true. It's for devout Christians who go up, who clearly feel that it's a special place to them, and they go up with great devotion to the Temple Mount. They give them these clothes. They're like ugly. They've never been laundered. And it's specifically to embarrass the Christians that go up to the Temple Mount. And
it looks crazy. I mean, it looks like something like the Catholic Church would have done in the Middle Ages to the Jews, and put this like dunce hats on them, and it's all neon yellow.
They have these dunce hats. And it's crazy. So there is definitely, and people forget, the world of Islam and the world of Christianity, there wasn't so much interfaith going on in the Middle Ages.
It's clearly a dhimmi costume.
It is. It's definitely connected to dhimmi, to the second class, to and even the status quo that they're talking about was to also make sure that there was Muslim control over the Christian holy sites in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
The Muslims, even they're like these nothing Muslim guys, they're the ones who have the keys to the Christian holy sites. So if a Christian thinks, oh, this has no connection to me, no. This is very, very important to Christians. They're very involved in this, whether they know it or not. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's what's so exciting for everybody, people who are catching on to that for this convention, to share, to talk about that excitement and where we are at, you know, in the the progression and of the Temple Mount, to watch what is God doing and what is God's vision for the Temple Mount of a house of prayer for all nations, and to discuss that and to be able to be free. We don't have to agree with each other on everything, but people can be free to really share their heart without fear of being shut down by anybody else. And people were so excited about that last convention to
It
be
was
able
really, it
to
was,
speak freely.
I kind of showed up not knowing what to expect and kind of thinking, yeah, it's nice. And it totally blew me away. And the people who went were so amazing. I distinctly remember, that's where I connected with Joe Good, where there I am, this Jew who's learned in yeshiva, you know, I have these people calling me Mr. Rabbi, and I'm like, me? Okay. And then there's this display of what the Second Temple looked like, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh yeah, there's that and there's that. And this Christian guy, Joe Good, walks out. He's like, no, that's not correct. And I'm like, what? How dare you? He schooled me backwards, and the man was brilliant. He was holy. He was sweet. It was, oh my gosh. So everyone
Yeah.
has so much to offer, you know, and yeah, we're the Jews and we're supposed to be the priests, but I think that there's definitely got to be some input from the Christians. You know, this is prophecy.
Yeah, I believe. I mean, if the calling of the Temple Mount, of Mount Zion, if the calling is that it is supposed, its essence is supposed to be a house of prayer for all
Right.
nations,
Yeah.
with Israel at the center as a given. I don't think we should universalize that, with Israel as the priestly nation, the nation of a kingdom of priests. Then, you know, like then there is something with the nations, especially connecting to the Temple Mount. And it's amazing that Lane Rittmeyer, one of the foremost archaeologists or archaeological architects, who Gabi Barkai puts ahead of the Bible as a source, as the ultimate source on the Temple Mount. He is a Christian, right?
He's brilliant.
Other key, Joe Good, one of the foremost experts on the Temple Mount alive in the world today, who's devoted his entire life, I think he's in his 70s now, just to Jewish sources and studies of the Temple Mount. You know, he's a believer in Jesus. He's not Jewish, and he wants to partner with the Jewish people to just see the progression, just like there has been Christian Zionism with the state of Israel and supporting the Jewish people in Jerusalem, and not to the detriment of any other minority in Israel. You know, that's the thing. What people don't realize is when Israel is not sovereign and Israel is not taking its role and responsibility in Jerusalem, Arab peoples, Muslims, Christians, other people suffer.
Mm-hmm.
That's ultimately what ends up happening when Israel feels pressured to abandon something. The people ultimately end up suffering in a much worse situation. We've seen it time and time again.
And it's funny. What is the other side? The Muslims. What is their goal? It's like their goal is only Muslims, which is the opposite. It's not like, it's the exact opposite of a house of prayer for all nations. They want it to be a house of prayer for their nation. And to be honest, for a long time, I know a lot of Jews who their vision of the third temple is a big synagogue. And if we had been left to our devices, if we had succeeded in 1967 and built the temple in 967, it would have been a big synagogue for Jews. And then there would
Hmm.
be the argument, is it Ashkenazi or Sephardi? But that's a different thing. But because Moshe Dayan did the unthinkable and gave our holiest site, gave our heart to the
Hmm.
Muslims, to the Arabs, to the Palestinians, because he did that, we can't just take it and make a synagogue. We're kind of have to make a house of prayer for all nations. We can't just go up and kick the Arabs out and take it over. Now we're dependent on the other nations, which is good, because I remember when I reread, I should find the verse, you could probably tell me, John, where King Solomon dedicates the temple.
Right.
And like the third thing he says is, when the foreigners come to pray here, accept their prayers.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, so it's not a synagogue? It's not just for Jewish prayers? People from other nations, people from other religions, foreigners. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I would love I would love it if Israel became a tourist paradise for, prayer. It
And it is already. It
is,
is
yeah.
already. I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of people that come here, that are drawn here because of their faith in Jesus and in their faith in the Bible, to come here. I mean, they're drawn and they pray at the Western Wall, but they think, okay, this is what the Jews most value most, is the Western Wall, and it's the only remains of the temple. But there's a reason people that at the Western Wall that people face a certain direction. Why is it there? And what's so odd is really that the Western Wall, in essence, is a symbol of the discrimination against the Jewish people not to be allowed at
Mm,
their holiest site.
mm.
And that's what happened after 1967. The attention was diverted from the Temple Mount and said, we will make a plaza down by the Western Wall, where we have been relegated for several hundred years by the political powers and empires around us. And and I think there is a progression. There's a movement that's happening. It's not just Jerusalem, like the Western Wall or the Old City, but at the heart of it is Zion, God's holy mountain. Um, and I'm so excited about that. And that's why I'm excited about the convention also, that it's going to feature creatives like musicians and filmmakers, like a passion, young people. We don't want to exclude. I don't like when it's like, oh, it's a youth movement. We're rebellious. We're going to take over the world. We're the new generation. There needs to be all the generations together. That's what I get excited about. So we're working on a major film, to show the Temple Mount in a positive light, not all the conflict, not all the debates and the hostility and all that stuff. That's been
It
done.
drives me crazy as a journalist when people write about the Temple Mount. There's this necessity to write, the word flashpoint.
Contested site, the
Yeah,
flashpoint
and I was
site,
like,
the controversial
flashpoint? You're
site.
talking about the holiest site. You could have said the holiest site to so many religions, but no, flashpoint. It is not the flashpoint. It's, what comes from the Temple Mount? Peace, not war.
I
Flashpoint.
think the Temple Mount is also a reflection of the state of the world. Somehow it's like a
Absolutely.
microcosm. So, I mean, things are sometimes tense up there, and I think it's just a reflection of the state of the world. But the film that we want to show is the music, the festivals, the prayer, the vision of the future of the kingdom come. Those are the things we want to highlight, and the history, the incredible history of the glory of God. Director David Kern is working on, who did probably one of the best, if not the best, Israel film I have ever seen. I Am Israel. He's doing this film on the Temple Mount together with us, and we're going to show a sneak peek, like a chunk of the film, exclusively at the convention for people to see.
I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah,
I'll let you in on a little secret. You also hooked in Yair Levy.
yeah. That's so exciting. Like, if you think about let's see. I wish there was a young guy who's a top Israeli music artist who really plays contemporary Israeli sabra. He's a sabra music guy, an Israeli artist, and I really wish he were a Levite. You know, wouldn't it be amazing? And I wish he dreamt about playing the Psalms up on the Temple Mount. And couldn't he? Wouldn't it be nice if he was like a warrior, like King David, also a warrior and a poet?
Oh yeah. He was
And
not only a
also
warrior, he was one of the biggest commandos. It's so funny. I saw it. So
the Israeli Navy SEALs.
yes. And your brother-in-law Daron was also a commando. So the two of them together, the sweetest guys in the world, who if things went down, they could take out platoons of terrorists. The two of them alone,
Yeah.
barehanded. So the way I met Yair was I wrote an article about the name of God, Yud He Vav Ke, appearing in bushes on the side of the Temple Mount. And Yair saw this, and he was recently out of the army, and he's, finding his way back, and he's like, no, there's no way. This is like, Daniel seeing the writing on the wall. This is God's finger writing on the, no way. And he said that it's in front of everyone, so everyone would be talking about it. It's in a public place. And so Doron, your brother-in-law from Cry for Zion, took him to that, and they're both looking at it, and Yair's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. It was amazing. And so I reached out to him like, yeah, great video. Let me tell you something. This happens.
And that went viral. Let me tell you.
That went viral.
I mean, your article through that video got exposed to the world. I mean, it blew up.
But
hundreds of thousands
got exposed
of views.
to Yair, who's a mommy. I love the guy. And then he did a video with Daron where they went to the Temple Mount. And as you pointed out, Yair is a Levi. He's a Levite. And he takes it very seriously. And he went up there, and I think he sang Shir HaMa'alot, which is the psalm, the song of the stairs that the Levites used to sing as they stood on the stairs. And
Christians know it, are used to it as the Psalms of Ascent, the Psalms of going up.
Right.
Yeah.
So Shir HaMa'alit would be the songs of the elevator, but that's a mispronunciation. But he sang it, and what was amazing was this is precisely the kind of thing, and he sang it on the steps going up to the Dome of the Rock. This is precisely the kind of thing that Waqif guards, they sharpen up their pickaxes for that. You're not allowed to do that. And he stood out in the open, and you saw Waqif guards and Palestinians walking past back and forth, and he was singing it, and they didn't even see him. It was wow. It was wow.
It was something really special, and that I think Jews and Christians should unite on with anybody of good faith to talk about what should be done on the Temple Mount. But we can also, I think, at the convention, we're going to talk about some of the important steps that have been made in the last 5 to 10 years on the Temple Mount, of where things have moved as far as freedoms and rights have changed on the Temple Mount. Like Yair could have been, if it was 2015, let's say, or 2014, the Israeli police might have jumped on him and or the Waqf and covered his mouth with their hands and carried him on their shoulders off of the mount.
Right. And there's the people who,
but not so today.
It still occasionally happens, but when I speak to the Temple Mount activists, what they say is, look, and the way prayer came about, Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount, where we can get away with prayer. The reason is, first of all, it's Israeli law. We're required to have equality of religion in Israel. It's a developed country. And so according to Israeli law, I should be able to go up there and have equal religious rights on the Temple Mount. But more importantly is the fact that the police can't stop us anymore. There's just too many Jews going up, and too many Jews who are like, I'm praying. They just can't stop it.
Yeah.
It's not like
That's
it's
true.
not like you're smashing this.
There's a de facto situation on the ground, but there are also important court decisions that have
Yep.
been made as far as praxis and daily interpretation and application of the law and rights in Jerusalem. And that's something we need to talk about, what's happening on the Temple Mount, because it's very exciting and it's
Well,
definitely changed certain things.
I'd be very interested to hear about that, because the law says one thing, and the law adds a little thing that says, oh, but the police can take into account security. I don't know. During was it Sukkot or Tishrei? I think it was Tishrei. Before leading up to in Elul, leading up to Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Yehuda Glick went up, and he had a cell phone, and he
Yeah,
started playing the sound of a shofar, and they
yeah.
arrested him for the recording of a shofar. So then they went down outside the Temple Mount
Hmm.
to the Arab cemetery outside the Temple Mount, and were blowing shofar. And the police arrested them day after day. At one point, the judge said, "You can't do this anymore. It's totally legal to blow shofar in Jerusalem." And the next day, they
Yeah.
arrested them again. It was crazy. The police, they don't care. The judges were saying you can't arrest them, and they did. So,
Well, they have, that's the thing. The police keep getting taken to court to see if their actions were properly done. And when one sense one can feel that they don't care, in another, things have changed because of
it's true.
people's persistence. And this is something that Ben Shapiro highlighted and
Yeah.
excellent when he went up. I mean, it was very recent that he was here, that he went up, that he talked about it. That's a major. There's a lot of Christians who watch Ben Shapiro, and are educated, are getting awareness about the Temple Mount through him. And that was a landmark thing, especially through High on the Heart, which is a great new organization who are really
Mhm.
bringing, who are going to be at the convention, and with
MJ.
Dr. MJ, yeah, she will be there from High on the Heart, who hosted Ben Shapiro, and from what I've seen from pictures, also also Jordan Peterson, superstar in the Christian world, of the up and coming
Oh,
young
he
generation.
went up,
The
and
pictures, there's
he was
pictures of
totally
him on the mount.
transformed. He's like, I've had an experience here. He was really blown away. And he was saying that as a Christian, he's a devout Christian. Well, he argues that point, but he
Yeah,
was
no,
he
yeah.
was totally blown away and transformed. Yeah, MJ's going to be there. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of really people I like, a lot of friends. I'm looking forward to it.
She represents also what I think is happening with the Temple Mount. It's being normalized. It's being brought to a younger generation. It's being brought to the eyes of the world, where it's no longer seeming like it's some sort of Disney World, Star Wars from another planet
And
type of
she's
issue.
not an Orthodox Jew.
She has, I don't know where she
I
stands
don't know.
exactly personally, but she works, her partner in High on the Heart is definitely a fully Orthodox rabbi, and she has
Yehuda
great
Levi,
respect
Rabbi
for the
Yehuda
Orthodox
Levi. He's a
community.
brilliant man.
Yeah,
He's a brilliant
yeah.
man. So
Where she seems to have great faith of some kind. Maybe it's not fully Orthodox in some sense, but that's kind of part of the picture
yeah,
of that we need to come together on this, and not just little like, or not little, but not just segregating off these specific communities. This is your thing.
and
It
not just
doesn't
sitting there
concern
saying,
me.
"Oh, my rabbi said," or "My pastor said," or "My branch of Judaism," or "My branch of Christianity." No, this is like, I got the spirit. I'm going. That's really where it's coming from. Yeah,
I mean, there's that, and people who are willing to look at, from my perspective, to look at the Bible. What does the
yeah.
Bible really say about the Temple Mount? And what is the New Testament for Christians? What does it say about the Temple Mount? And that's been a huge experience for me. And I really look forward to hearing about what that could mean for the Christian world at the convention.
Yeah, that's something I if I could if I could beg of the Christians to bring something in, it's this. When as a Jew, when I came to Israel, I'm like, I was raised on pictures of of the Western Wall. I could like sketch it in my sleep, and when I go, even I remember when I was 17 years old and I went to Engedi, and I'm like, this is where King David stood, literally. I go to these places and I'm like, this is literally where my people stood. I go to Shiloh, that's where the tabernacle was, this tent, and it's in my head, and it's real. And for some reason, for some Christians, I don't get that they get that. It's when you go up to the Temple Mount, you're not, touring. You're not a tourist. You are literally, you could, if they could outline the footprints and like, this is where Jesus walked when he came to the temple,
That's my favorite thing as a discovery, and I think it's something of a, because we've been so divorced, Jews and Christians, from each other. The tourist industry took that for granted and took people on Christian tours and Jewish tours. But when Christians start taking the Jewish tours and the Jewish tour routes, they realize, oh my goodness, Jesus stood right here in the temple. Paul cut his hair right over there in the chamber of the Nazarites. Mary, or Miriam as she was called in Hebrew, she stood right at that spot, right there, and watched her doves being offered at the dedication and of Jesus in the temple. This is where the tables were flipped. This is where all the apostles would have stood and prayed daily, right here. This is where the lame man would have been healed. Like, yeah, there's not a lot of places. Most places in Israel, you're like, well, generally in this area. I'm telling you, on the Temple Mount.
Right. Right. Jews have been standing around it for 2,000 years going, any day now, any day. And now is the day. And we can go up there. And it's, also I go up there, and there's this pile of boards it's like down the stairs in the near the Golden Gate, okay, and it's covered with the blue tarp, and you think, oh, they're doing construction. No. Those boards were when in the early 1900s, the Aqsa Mosque collapsed. The roof collapsed.
Right.
So they rebuilt the roof, and they took the boards from the roof and they put them off to the side. And they've been sitting there for 100 years, and which is not good for them. And someone managed to get some of them, and they did carbon dating. They're from the first temple. No building materials were taken up there. You go up there, there's, as soon as you get up there, there's this one plaza off to the right with all these like Doric columns and carved stones. And it's not an archaeological museum. No one brought that up there. Those were from the temples. You're walking on the stones, unless the stones look like they're like 40 years old. Those stones have been up there from the temple. No one built anything. As much as they could reuse the materials, the Muslims used the material from the temples to build their buildings. The stones you're walking on, they had this thing where they started rioting, and they were blocking off so that the Jews couldn't go around, and they were using stones that were carved from the first and second temple. We're talking thousands of years. It's difficult to grasp this.
Yeah, and it's still Zion lays in ruins in a certain sense. There's parts where you can walk and you just look at and hear its stuff all the way from the modern British Empire all the way back to like Solomon's time, or who knows what, just laying in heaps of rubble in acres upon acres of land in the middle of the tight spaced old city. And there's also Christian history. I've been more and more aware of that as I go up. A lot of those colonnades sitting on the right are from churches that were up on the Temple Mount, or the roof of the Al-Aqsa, the silver dome, the third holiest site in some of Islam, is the roof of a church building that was taken from Lebanon, from a Lebanese church, and made into the roof of the mosque. And there's a lot of Christian history up there as well, of just pure archaeology.
There's Christian history, but that's also where the Arabic calligraphy on the tiles on the outside of the building are all these hadiths from the Quran that are all about horrible Jesus and all about horrible Christianity. It's really because
I have, yeah, one of the most viewed videos that we've put out at Cry for Zion is how did Islam get connected with the Temple Mount, and it talks about that how the Dome of the Rock came to be and the Al Aqsa Mosque and brought into the Muslim story, and really it is a propaganda piece against Christianity. Is what it was.
I think it's Al-Aqsa Mosque is precisely the same dimensions as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They wanted to make it like, haha, we can build it just the same size. And Byzantine churches were all octagons, just like the Muslim buildings. They built it to show that they were at least as good and even better than the Christians. There's a war going on up there. There is a spiritual war, and if we can't get together on this, Christians and Jews are both going to lose. There's no question about that.
That and also, like, we don't share a Bible with Muslims. In the same way, you and I can share sources that we consider the same, inspired by God. But as Maimonides, the famous rabbinic sage, pointed out, that's not shared material with the Muslim world.
Right.
But at the same time, I support Jewish sovereignty on the Temple Mount because I believe they will do what's right for whatever other groups there are. And the most famous Temple Mount activist of all is Rabbi Yehuda Glick, who's going to be speaking at the convention also, who was nearly assassinated for his work for freedom on the Temple Mount. And he is a staunch supporter of Muslim rights, that no one should trample on their freedoms and on their rights.
He's corrected
So for
me
people
about
who
that.
want to, yes,
I've written
there is
about
a
him and I've said,
conflict.
you advocate for Jewish rights on the Temple Mount. It's like, I advocate for universal rights on the Temple Mount. House of prayer for all nations. He's very strong about that. So yeah. Anyway, John, as usual, I could talk with you.
People say he's an extremist. He says, I'm only an extremist in human rights.
Yeah. John, I think we're going to call it a day. I have a rule to always leave the viewers wanting more. I'm going to post this with the article about the conference and with the link to the conference. I highly recommend watching it online. It's a group of amazing people, all of them I love, talking about the most amazing topic in the world. It's going to be, and like I said, I'm still rocking from the 2018 conference. I'm still rocking from it. So hopefully this one will rock me for the next few years. Okay. Thank you so much, John. Be blessed.
God willing.
Be blessed. Everyone,
Thank you so much.
everyone, you bless us.
You
We're
as
going to
well.
bless you. That's the way it works. Thank you so much.